So let's use our custom HTTP hook in the users component. For that, first of all, we need to import it, of course. Import use HTTP client from shared hooks HTTP hook. Then, just as before, we can get rid of these states, not offloaded users. I do want to manage this here in this component. So I will call use HTTP client here. And what we get back, just as before, is an object which we can destructure. There we'll have the isLoading state, our potential error state. We'll then also have our sendRequest function there and the clearError function. Now here I already got sendRequest as a name, and to avoid duplication I'll name this here fetch users and therefore call fetch users here, of course. So a little adjustment in the useEffect function. Then in here we can get rid of setIsLoading, and then here I want to have try catch, of course, but I will await sendRequest, so this function that comes from my custom hook. This needs our URL and actually nothing else, because it is configured to, as a default, send a GET request, not add any body, and not add any special headers. So this is just fine as it is. We don't need to do that parsing, as you learned. However, of course, what I get back here is my response data now, because we do that parsing in the sendRequest function in our custom hook, and therefore here we can set our loaded users. If we have an error, we don't need to do anything here, and I will remove setIsLoading here. Now you see, useEffect complains here about a missing dependency, because now indeed sendRequest is a dependency of useEffect. I used the sendRequest function in there, and the sendRequest function is coming from outside the effect. That's why it is important to have sendRequest be wrapped in useCallback here in the custom hook. Because if this would not be wrapped in useCallback, it would be recreated whenever the hook reruns, and the hook reruns whenever the component that uses the hook reruns, because there we call use HTTP client, and it is just a regular JavaScript function after all, so of course it executes again. And if this reruns and gives us a new sendRequest object, even with the same logic in the function, it's technically a new object, useEffect would fire again, send a new request, and we would have an infinite loop. So use callback around sendRequest in our custom hook is super important. With that, we can correctly specify it as a dependency here, as we should, and we are sending our request. Now we can get rid of the error handler and just point at clearError here on the onClear prop. And with that, we should be good. If I now reload, you see, this seems to work. If I reload, we're fetching the users. Now let's also see if we correctly get an error here. If I, for example, sent this to an invalid URL where I removed the S at the end, and I get an error, could not find this route. So this works. Of course, our application is broken now, but this clearly also is an error we should catch as a developer during development. So with that, it works again. This is looking pretty decent to me. We're using our custom hook here, and with the custom hook added now and being used in all our user-related routes, it's now finally time to make sure that if we are authenticated, we actually also are able to create a new place here and send a request to the appropriate backend route there as well.